Right, we need to talk about international football. It sucks. It sucks balls. Like, other than the major tournaments, which are frankly dwindling in quality anyway due to player fatigue, no one likes international football. No one. Like, it's as if it's purposefully designed to be as tedious as possible. You know what? I'm going to let Harry Redknapp take this one.
Jake, we don't win anything. We qualify, we beat all these teams, 10 out of 10 we win. We get to the tournament, useless. Yeah. It happens year after year after year. So I've even lost interest. I'm sitting here, I'm not even watching the game. I've got it on, and I'll be honest with you, I hear the commentator go, we're playing Malta. He goes, this number 18, he works at the checkout counter during the week of a supermarket. And I think, what am I watching this for? I can't wait for the Premier League to start again.
International football, it just isn't designed to create the best fan experience. It just comes around every month or so, especially in autumn, and it just disrupts the flow of the club season every now and then you get England playing someone like Lithuania or San Marino, so we just get to see Harry Kane destroy a load of truck drivers for no reason. No one gains from it. The fans don't even learn anything about the players in the team and how they work together. Neither does the manager, by the way. Like, it doesn't work for anyone. I'm using England as an example, but this is happening in every country. Like, German fans don't want to play Andorra, and frankly, Andorran fans have no interest in watching their team getting slapped about by Germany. And on top of this, the organisers aren't exactly getting much revenue from these mismatches that fans aren't interested in, so no one wins, apart from the Andorran FA, who make a few quid, I suppose. The system, especially in Europe, is broken, and it desperately needs to be fixed. Even for South American players, they are consistently, in autumn, every month, they are making these really long flights, travelling to South America and then back again, so they often miss the first game back from international duty because of things like jet lag. And then you've got AFCON and the Asian Cup. Those tournaments, they're played during the league season in Europe, so you actually decentivise clubs from buying African and Asian players because they know every couple of winters they're going to be gone for a few games. And not only that, but those competitions aren't getting the exposure that they could be getting because they're having to compete with leagues like the Premier League and La Liga for viewership. And at least in Europe, the Nations League is a step in the right direction because you've got teams of similar quality playing each other, but it's so meaningless. Like, it is the League Cup of international games. It means nothing. And the most annoying thing about all of this is that international football has so much potential. Like, it's such a fairer playing field than club football, where managers can't just, go out and buy whoever they like just to replace a position, to make up for their lack of tactical nous. Like, it's such a fairer playing field. You have to, play with what you're given. And if a country, generates, sometimes by fluke, this golden generation of players, then, like say Belgium did 10 years ago, those players can't get poached by the likes of England and Spain. They're going to stay with that country their entire career, and in those next 10 years they might go and win a trophy with, a smaller nation. And that, can't happen at club football. Like, imagine if that happened to, Southampton, back in the day. Imagine if they never sold that golden generation of players. They could have achieved something. And frankly, I think the current format just completely pisses that opportunity up the wall when it's not in major tournaments. I mean, England versus Malta has absolutely zero entertainment value. And you might counteract that point with, well, Malta and all, countries in the world should have an opportunity to qualify for these major tournaments. And yes, you're absolutely right. Malta should have the opportunity, through meritocracy, to qualify for these tournaments like everyone else. But I want to refer to the FA Cup as an example. Right, the FA Cup is long. Like, it starts a very long time before the Premier League clubs get involved. There's more than 700 teams in the FA Cup. There are a lot of rounds before any Premier League and even Championship teams get involved. The clubs at the bottom of the pyramid in England have to win a lot of games in order to eventually get to the point of the last 64 where the Premier League teams join in. Now, that is still based on sporting meritocracy. Like, it just doesn't make sense for Premier League teams to enter in the first round where mainly these Sunday League teams, are all playing each other. No one would want to see that, but it is on meritocracy. If a Premier League team, say West Ham, for example, got relegated like down 9 divisions in the football pyramid, they would start their FA Cup campaign much earlier. But because they're a Premier League team, they're afforded a pass into the last 64. The format's been around for ages, and no one has ever complained that that system is unfair or, doesn't give enough opportunity, it's not based on sporting merit. No one complains about it. It also provides a much better experience for fans. No one, frankly, is interested in the likes of Mo Salah, Erling Haaland or Cole Palmer barely even breaking a sweat and just destroying your local Sunday League team. But what I've just described to you is exactly what UEFA have designed their qualifying process to be. Like, why there hasn't been discussions of moving to a similar style of format to the FA Cup, in terms of you only have the biggest teams join in later on in qualifying. It blows my mind. So today I'm going to talk about what I would do if I was in charge. And one thing I must say is this series is not based on realistic possibilities of things that could actually be changed in football, because, as I've said, these governing bodies, they completely act on their own self-interest, and they're not actually dedicated to getting anything done that's really in the interest of fans. This is a weird imaginary world where I, Samuel Turner, have the complete totalitarian authority on every single footballing governing body, so that I can just completely reshape the rules and the competitions of the sport to my will, to create the best experience that I think can be created for the fans. And also remember, these are just my opinions. Like, if you disagree, that's fine, and I'd love to have a proper discussion or a debate about it. And if you've got any other good ideas, please let me know in the comments, but as long as we keep it civil and don't abuse each other. But with that being said, let's get started. So first things first, World Cup goes back to 32 teams. We go entirely back to the old format. It worked, it was brilliant. This whole nonsense about 48 teams and then we're having third place teams. No, stop it. It's terrible. We're going back to 32 teams for the World Cup, and we're going back to 16 teams for the Euros as well. 4 groups of 4, the old-fashioned way. I'm done with this third place, best third place team nonsense, right? It's out, it's scrapped. And for major tournaments, we are going to have a maximum of 2 host nations, right? I'm not having all this nonsense of like, we're gonna have 3 host nations in an entire continent, or in 2030 we're gonna have Uruguay and Argentina down here starting, but then we're gonna finish in Spain, Portugal, and then Morocco. No. We enjoy having a proper host nation because you embrace that nation's culture. They get to host it, it's special. I'll do 2 at the max. This is the first big radical change. Now, this has been proposed in some form by Arsene Wenger. I would have the international breaks during the season be limited to 2 international breaks, and they would span 5 or 6 games each, so you'd have an entire month set out just for these international breaks. I'll have them in October and February, for example, and this will do a lot of things. It will lessen travel for players in countries like South America. They will just make the one trip there and the one trip back, instead of having to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the main thing it's going to do is it's going to stop this stop-start nature of the season, when a good league season is getting interrupted by these meaningless 2 little game international breaks. And what it will do is, if you have like a month dedicated to these, it gives you as a football fan the chance to kind of get in the spirit of the international games, like we do with the major tournament. For that month, you really, you're absolutely, going for England, really getting behind them. That's what would happen, hopefully, with these kinds of international breaks. It's also going to allow managers more time to work with players on complex tactical systems, which will improve the fans' enjoyment of the game, because these managers, they barely get to work with these players. They come through the door and they've got fitness issues. They don't get to get a proper look at how these players fit in with the dynamic of the squad, how they behave on a longer kind of major tournament style camp. And then they get some players arriving later as well, and they just don't get to really work with these players for a long space of time. They get them for like a week and a half at best. And plenty of players are still going to get opportunities because the squad limits for these international breaks will go up to 30, so that the manager has a chance to look at more different players. And for major tournaments, we're going to put the squad limit back down to 23. What I hope that these measures would do is also remove the constant, you see it all the time in international breaks, you see players just clearly ducking out of international duty and just feigning injury. And they can do that because, oh, well, why does it matter if they only miss, 2 games in a row for England against the Faroe Islands and, I don't know, North Macedonia? It doesn't matter, but they wouldn't dare miss 6 games in a row. And if you see my previous video on reforming the club calendar so that there's less fixtures, there's less incentive there for them to rest themselves anyway. So this is the big one. I am completely reforming European internationals. What we're going to have in Europe instead is, in the World Cup and the European qualifiers, you are now not going to have every European nation in those qualifiers. You're going to have 6 groups of 6. And your position in the most recent Nations League tournament, in terms of where you are in the league phase, that will determine your seeding, and that will determine if you actually qualify. So you only qualify for the World Cup and European Championships, final qualifying groups, if you finished either in League A, League B, or you won your group in League C in the Nations League. So there's a clear pathway for any European nation to qualify for this phase, but if you fall below that, you're not part of this European qualifying. Each group of 6 is going to play 2 rounds of games, so that's 10 games for each team, and then what you're going to get is your winners and your runners-up will qualify. That's 12 teams, so for the World Cup we have 13 teams. This is the only time I'm going to use it, okay? We're going to have the 4 best third place teams are going to have semi-finals and a final to determine the 1 extra team that goes to the tournament. And then for the Euros, you get your 2 best third place teams will go through, so that's your 14, and then your extra 2 will do 2 playoffs between the other third place teams to determine the extra 2, and then you've got your 16. And so you've got 2 years between each tournament, so these qualifiers are done in 2 big blocks of international breaks. It'll be in both of the October international breaks. So per season, you have 1 window of qualifiers, and that's going to be half of your qualifying season. And that's all taken up there, and that's it for the season. That's it. You get those 6 games in that block, and that's it for the season. I've just put on the screen now an example of what this would look like, and if you look at some of these groups, I think this would be really entertaining to watch these groups where you've got more unpredictability and anyone can really beat anyone. I think these groups would be really exciting to see, and it would show off the depth of quality that European football has. I just think this is a better idea than, Lithuania and San Marino and Moldova all the time. No offence to those lads. So the Nations League remains, but I've changed it. The teams in each group only play each other once. So it's like your major tournament groups. You only play 1 game against each team, 3 games each for every team in the group, and each group will have its specific chosen host nation. So they'll all be neutral games, apart from one of the teams in the group will play all the games at home. The winner of each group advances obviously to the semi-finals and the final, and those are all played within the same international break, within February. So if you get to the semis and final, you will play 5 games in that month. And if you don't win your group in the Nations League, you'll just be put in 2 friendly games against teams that finished in similar positions in other groups. What this means is the Nations League finals that happen in the summer is done. That doesn't happen. You just have it contained in February, and you win the trophy in February, and it's all contained there. And now the Nations League is really important because it not only determines if you get to be in the qualifying stages for the World Cup and the Euros, it also determines your seeding in those groups. So if you look at how England dropped down into League B, that in my universe would impact the groups they get drawn into, because they'd go into seed 3 or into seed 4, which means they'd get tougher qualifying groups. So even if you don't win the Nations League, it really matters for your major tournament aspirations. And so for the smaller countries in Europe, we're not just leaving them behind, they do have the opportunity through meritocracy to get into those qualifying phases. They've just got to climb high enough in the Nations League. And when I do my video in this series about the financial structure, we are going to filter much more money down to those smaller nations so they can invest in their grassroots and in their football associations, etc. And that will mean that they won't have to rely on the occasional odd payday from playing England or France. It won't matter. And whilst the qualifying phases are going on in October, you can have these smaller teams have a little mini tournament amongst themselves so that they're also playing teams around their quality level and they have a chance to actually go and win a trophy instead of, being used as stat padding for Ronaldo. And due to the Europe-wide winter break that I referred to in the first video of this series, AFCON and the Asia Cup are going to get way more exposure because whilst the club game is on a break, AFCON and the Asia Cup are going to be the main football tournaments that are on, so they'll get way more viewership, and it will also stop decentralizing big clubs from buying African and Asian players because they're not going to miss the amount of games that they do now. With the Copa America, I'm okay with keeping that to 16 teams. I know it's a bit controversial, but I think it's an ideal amount of teams for a tournament. All 10 South American teams qualify, and then you can have 4 teams from North America, and then they can have 2 invitationals. The North American Gold Cup can stay, but the key is that every continental tournament now has to happen once every 4 years. That's it. I'm not having these every 2 years nonsense. Every 4 years, just like the Euros. And last but certainly not least, we are going to ban countries from hosting the World Cup if their climate is not suitable for hosting a football tournament during European summer months. We're just not. The reality is that most football fans are in the West, where the summer months are June, July and August. And look, football above all should be about player welfare and fans' experience. And if your country can't safely host a World Cup within the summer months where most football fans are watching, you can only safely do it in winter months, your country should not host a World Cup. It's not about discriminating against other cultures or it's about being political. It's nothing to do with that at all. It's just factually respecting the geographical conditions. The World Cup is and always has been, apart from 2022, a summer tournament. It's just like the Olympics. And you know what, maybe this rule's just about me, but I will not go to a pub during the World Cup in the freezing cold winter with like 5 layers on to watch an England game with World in Motion in my headphones whilst I'm wrapped up. I won't do it. I refuse. No, I'm not having it. But that just about rounds off my ideas for international football. It honestly blows my mind that these ideas, at least some of them, aren't even thought about. But what do you guys think about it? Please do let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching and putting up with my rant. Till next time, I will upload another video. I think next will be the one about the rules and my reform of the rules, so please stay tuned for that. But until next time, see you later.